All right. All right, so then I'll call the meeting to order at whatever, 6:31. The meeting of the zoning bylaw committee for January 23rd. I don't see that anybody else is with us yet, but I do know that Tanya Bodell from the Alternative Energy Committee is going to join us a little later. I told her probably 7:30 before we get to that stuff, but we'll see. If I could do roll call of who's here.
Clark Brewer here.
Tom Callahan here.
Cassie Malatesta here.
David Farag here.
Okay, and also with us is Judge Cutler and Cassandra Thayer. Lauren joining us tonight?
She is not.
Lucky her. Okay, so let's dive right into it. I have as the first thing, we're going to review the final language for Article 8. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. I get the judge and I were just speaking, and I guess we do need to resolve whether we're going to present two articles or one article for Article 8. The housekeeping changes and the shortening of it, the consolidation of it is easy. And if I understand this, correct me if I'm wrong, Judge Cutler, that would still come with the existing single lot exemption language, except that we would add the June date, June 30.
Yeah, it's not the existing language, but it's the existing provision just reorganized and revised.
Okay, so, and no inclusion of dates or anything else.
No,
So we're leaving it as is. Okay.
right. Except in the first option, I left it, I think in the first option, I left it in, but we can just remove them.
Yeah, no, that's good. Okay, and then
No, I'm sorry, they are not in the first option. I take that back. No, they're not in the first option, they're in the second option.
Okay, and then the second part of the warrant article would be to just deal with the change of the single lot exception standing alone. And
If you
that
wish, yeah.
yeah, and that would include a date by which we would be a cutoff date for the creation of lots. And by putting in June 30, 2023, we are still preserving everybody who has rights under the existing single lot exemption. Because that case, and what's the case's name again? It's something with two B's. Whatever. That case, that case tells us we have to respect the rights that Cohasset has created all these years, these extra rights.
Right.
But
If I
then
could
the
just-
also the inclusion of the date in subsection C of the single lot, our single lot exemption language will cut off creation of new rights for any lots that are created after June 30, 2023.
Right. Other than
And-
those two subdivision lots, but
Right, and if the subdivision lots are in transition, where they applied before June 30th, not approved till after June 30th, they're going to have essentially 8 years to act
mhm,
on that.
yeah.
Okay. So that's the approach, is the two-step process. And the reason being, to the extent the single lot exemption change becomes controversial, if it were to be defeated, the other housekeeping changes we're proposing for Article 8 would still presumably pass in the
Yeah,
first.
that's option. So option one, you're doing the whole thing without that cutoff date in part A. In part B, you've got the change to you've got removal of the definition of abandonment in Article 2. So that's taken out.
Right.
And so those two would probably be under one motion.
Right.
And then if that passes and you want to try to put in that date, that would be a second motion.
Right.
Okay.
And usually we set that up as that, we'd have a single warrant article and it would have a part A it would have a part B, a part C, you know, we do that with the Community Preservation Act article. We do that sometimes with zoning articles. We've done
Yeah.
that in the past, so.
And I think what I sent you was structured that way, so hopefully that would work. If you don't want to have a second motion under that article, and we have it in the second article, we would take part C off the first option, and we would just have the latter part in an entirely new
Well,
article.
All right, I'm of the thought of doing this in the 2 steps, just in case. Anybody else? Thoughts on that? Let's make the final decision is tonight about that.
Well, it seems like the framework that you have goes a long way to preserving existing rights that people have in respect to case law that's relevant. So, you know, I applaud the approach.
Okay. Yeah,
And,
well,
and in terms of whether it's A or B, or it's ended up being Article 11 and Article 12, to me, it doesn't really matter. One would be a part of the housekeeping reorganization, and the other would be content.
Right.
And I think it's fairly narrow for everyone to be able to grasp in its approach.
yeah, I think so. So, all right. Did we vote in this last time, or do we have to vote on it, or just?
You voted on the wording of how we would rewrite Article 8, but not on how the warrant article would be established.
Okay, so I'll make the motion. The motion is that we accept the draft of Article 8. That'll be a 2-part article. Part one with the housekeeping changes, including the moving and the rewriting of the definition of abandonment. And part 2 would be the change to the single lot exemption that will now include a plan date of June 30, 2023.
Right. Although the way it's structured, it's presented as 3 parts. It's just your motion would cover part A and B.
Right.
As written in the warrant, and then the second motion would be part 3.
Okay.
Okay.
Anybody second that?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, or any further discussion about it?
Nope.
Okay, all in favor, alphabetical roll call.
Clark Brewer, aye.
Tom Callahan, aye.
David Farag, aye.
Cassie Malatesta, aye.
Okay. All right, thank you.
That's taken care of.
All right, moving right along. We have Article 3, which is the article about districts and the zoning map. The intent here is just to do housekeeping. If we do any changes to districts or creation of a district to deal with the housing issue, that's all going to come in the fall after we deal with, because it would come in conjunction with the reorganization of Article 4 uses. So,
Right.
so this is just a housekeeping article. Judge Cutler, have you and Lauren straightened out the dates of the?
Well, no, we haven't, and that's what I wanted to talk to you about. So it looks like we have 2 zoning maps, the TOD and the no, sorry, not the TOD,
Do you mean overlays?
the overlays, the GMSP, which is the ground mounted solar, and the TOD.
Plus,
are not-
plus,
Not
not
on formalized maps. There are sort of sketch maps that were presented to town meeting and accepted, but they were never actually, that information was never transferred in either a written description or on the map. That's now your zoning map that everybody gets except for the floodplain.
Okay.
So we have this sketch, we have one sketch, we don't have the TOD sketch. What we have is a description of the parcels that are in that district. And in the, I'm sorry, in the solar district, in the other district, in the TOD, these are parts of what had been the light industrial district in 2001, I believe. So we need that sketch plan so we can transfer the information for those 2 overlay districts onto an updated zoning map. There's no change in the zoning, it's just being shown, the boundaries are shown on the map. But we can't tie down, we haven't tied down that second district yet. So she said, she told me that she does have somebody who can prepare the map, so we could have it for town meeting. We could present it to town meeting to show that everything is on there. And I just think it's not a matter of adopting, new zoning. It's just when we approve this new Article 3 language, it will refer to that updated map date. And so we're sort of approving the whole thing all at once.
All right. And then to the extent we make other changes in the fall, we're doing the map over a second
And
time.
you'll do the map over a second time, right?
Okay.
Right.
Excuse
And,
me,
this change or this amendment to the current map it's not a lot as long as we have the boundaries. And so
Right.
we're still searching, I guess Lauren said she was going to check with the town clerk to see what we have attached to the article that adopted the TOD. And hopefully we can tie that down.
Yeah, and then this is one where if push came to shove in a town meeting, we didn't have all of this all lined up. It's not fatal that this one gets indefinitely postponed to the fall.
Yeah. I mean,
And then to the extent we're making any substantive changes like consolidating the harbor or creating a new overlay for the housing issue,
it'll all be at once.
we'd be doing it all at once then.
Right.
So,
Right.
all right. Anybody else have any questions about that?
well, we do have the Harbor Business District Overlay District.
That's so shown on your map now.
Okay, and we also shown on our map is the Water Resources District, which is like
Yes.
3/4 of the town.
Yes, but not the floodplain. The floodplain has its separate.
Yep.
Sort of volume.
And
Yeah,
it
so
was
our-
like,
our map
was-
is not wholly out of date. It's just the solar and the transportation overlays never got incorporated into them for
Right.
whatever reason. And
right, and
Right.
also the that rail spur, a year and a half ago, we changed the zoning from industrial up in the middle of Wampatuck State Park. That rail
Yeah.
spur got changed from industrial to open space.
Well, hopefully it's shown on this map because it's dated through May 21.
yeah, I think it does.
I
I think
just
I've
missed
seen
it.
You sure?
I
Yeah.
believe that it didn't get updated, but I could be
I
wrong.
thought I'd seen one where it's a green strip going into Wampatuck through the high, whatever the district otherwise is there. But could be wrong, but we'll have to double check that. But again,
We'll get a draft before town meeting.
yeah, and if this is not something we can get all thrown together by town meeting, the housekeeping changes here aren't fatal to be, that we can't postpone it until we
Exactly.
make, do
Exactly.
Article 3 more comprehensively. So,
Yeah, so the big, I would say if there's any kind of substantive change, maybe it's the way that we interpret a district boundary that divides a lot. So which side of the lot of the boundary can you rely on? So I took another shot at what we had discussed last time. So that's paragraph F of this version 2. It says when a base district boundary line divides a lot at the time the district boundary line is adopted, the use regulations for either district may be extended up to 50 feet into the portion of the lot in the other district, provided, and this is the important change, the lot has frontage on a street in the less restrictive district. And then the Board of Appeals special permit may allow that extension to be increased to a maximum of 200 feet. We had a little discussion last time about the use of the word restrictive district, the less restrictive or the more restrictive district, but it's pretty self-explanatory because all you have to do is look at which are the district regulations that are stricter, and that's the more restrictive district. So if you've got a residence A and a residence B, the residence A is going to be more restrictive because it has stricter requirements. So it's pretty standard, and I think it's something that everybody in the land use area understands. So hopefully it won't cause a problem. And it's pretty much the language that you're using now anyway.
I like this change, by the way. This is good.
Well, that makes it, that'll be part of the town meeting presentation. By the way, Clark likes this. I'm just kidding.
Hard to believe, hard to believe.
All right, so,
Sure.
all right, so can I have a motion to adopt the housekeeping changes and the boundary definition change to Article 3 as a warrant article, and that the presentation will be subject to us cleaning up the map by the time the town meeting rolls around?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'll have to adjust the language of the description of the map and put in the new date.
Yep.
In the, you know, in the warrant article. If we don't have it by then I think I'm gonna have to have the language that's there now. And hopefully I can have the references of where those other two districts are that I can insert in there. So hopefully we'll get this fixed in the last, you know, before this has to go to the printer.
Okay,
I'm sorry,
Okay.
and I just noticed in section D of that, just before that is, we still have the Mass Geodetic datum of 1929. And my understanding is
Oh, yeah.
1988 or something like that.
And Lauren's still looking for that.
Yep.
Yeah.
It should be 1988 or something relatively more recent.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I was saying to Lauren, I don't see anywhere on the current zoning district map that you have any reference to elevations. The only place you have references to elevations is in your floodplain, and that's the firm, and that has its elevations on there. And it has its own reference. I don't know what the datum
Right.
date is that they use, but that's all on that map, and there's no reason to have this in here if there's nothing.
Well,
where we
would it
refer-
make sense to just take out based on the Massachusetts Geodetic datum of 1929? And then just,
Is the distance above sea level?
yeah, I
Well,
mean,
I mean, you have to have a reference point of some kind, I think.
how about if we just change it to the current Mass Geodetic datum? And if it changes again, then
Well, then you're changing boundaries.
I don't understand.
So if the datum changes over time, possibly it could affect the actual elevation. And if this is a situation where you're not defining the boundaries by, you know, along a street or along another property line, but you're saying it's at elevation, you know, 320, you know, and I don't think you have anything like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, the reality is I don't think we have any district boundaries that
Yeah,
are based
that's
on
what I mean.
elevation.
Other
So-
than floodplain, and floodplain is explained in the firm, so you don't need it. I don't know if you want to leave this in just because.
Right, but our district boundaries are land use, not,
They're all by physical boundaries except the floodplain.
right? I just hate to put a reference in there that's outdated. But we're
Well,
gonna,
then-
we're gonna bring the
I agree.
language
If
to
we're
the
here to
planning
clean it up,
board.
if we're
and
here to clean it up, we
presumably
should just clean it up.
We're gonna bring the language to the planning board for public hearing. So presumably by then, if we have what's most recent, we can just change it.
And we can
If-
correct.
If removing it
correct it
and just
you can
saying
correct it in the motion.
mean sea level,
Mhm.
isn't gonna work.
right. Well, yeah, in other words, we have March to clean this one up too.
We have to
Until
clean
March,
this
at
a
least.
little more, right? Okay.
Right up until we go to the printing of the warrant, I think we can make those changes within the planning board's purview.
If you know stuff about this and can help Lauren find the data, Clark, by all means do.
Well, I would just give a call to my favorite engineers and surveyors, get it from them.
Okay. All right, so a
So-
motion to approve this warrant article with the
I'll say so
understanding-
moved.
Not as a warrant article, but the article revisions so
Yes.
far. Yes, okay.
All right, Dave, you're seconding.
Yes.
I, Cassie Malatesta.
Yeah, vote, Cassie's and I, Clark,
Clark Brewer, aye.
Tom Kelly and I.
David Farag, aye.
Okay.
And Tom, I see that, I think we've got Tanya there. So if you
Yes,
want to
I
take
see that Tanya's here.
the solar stuff.
Yeah,
bring that up.
Clark, what's your time frame?
I got 8 more minutes.
All right. Let's take Tanya since she's here. The height discussion, we can revisit, you can see. You didn't do a rewrite, but I got your email about your points about it, so we can
And
discuss that.
I've been drafting it based upon those comments and other comments that we talked about. So
Okay.
I think I promised you a couple of options.
Yeah,
so
what
that-
what we'll do is we won't finalize the vote on height until the next meeting, Clark.
Okay,
for your
thank you.
benefit. All right, Tanya, welcome.
Thank
How are
you.
you?
Good, thank you.
So I tried to, thank you for coming. I tried to convey that, you know, with the load of what we're doing, we're trying to do a lot of easy, low hanging fruit at this town meeting. Super substantive stuff is fall town meeting. We looked at these two articles as being maybe more low hanging fruit, since I think Judge Cutler's diagnostic indicated they were very well written. That was your committee a long time ago. I did want to, you know, though, since your committee had brought forward those two articles, I wanted to make sure you were in on any rewrites. So, Judge Cutler, this is Tanya Bodell. I believe you're the chair, right? You're the chair of our,
I am the chair of the Alternative Energy Committee.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet
I
you
just
too.
wanna- Tom, I just want to mention one thing, because the diagnostic treats the solar in two parts. One is just the basic solar bylaw that's there and just the structure and organization and provisions in it. But the other way it's addressed is actually in the diagnostic of the use regulations and the fact that we don't address statutory exemptions, including the statutory exemptions for solar. And my warning was, if we just leave the current solar overlay district and it only covers town land and just a couple of lots, the risk to the town is that if someone were to try and install a solar installation somewhere else in town and you haven't addressed it, the courts may say your district is too small and narrow, it violates section 3. This person is exempt, and they can go ahead, and there's no special permit provision, there's no nothing. So I'm a little leery about actually making just editorial changes to the current solar, only because it's going to go to the Attorney General's office.
Yep.
And the Attorney General is going to highlight this. And I was saying, you know, if we can scoop it up into the use regulations so that we can put minor installations, allow them by right, you know, for solar, I don't know, just solar panels that are accessory and those sorts of things. And we can address that as part of use regulations. Then I feel, and we can also look at where else these other solar installations may be located. We may not have an overlay district. There may be in the industrial district and in this district and in that district, you know, and define it that way, or a larger overlay district that will satisfy the courts and the Attorney General that we're meeting our obligations to allow for these things.
so I mean, is it an easy fix to our existing Article 4? No, okay, all right.
Right,
Um,
so did I miss wind? Is wind?
No, we haven't discussed wind yet.
Okay, so we're hitting solar first.
Solar is the one that's a little more has a legal issue that we need to face. So for the fall, we have Article 4 is our table of all the uses, and we have a table of uses and what's allowed and not allowed in every district. It's a gigantic laundry list, and it's problematic, and we're probably going to reform it by, maybe cutting it down, making it simpler, whatever we do to it. But if we need to include something in that table of uses regarding solar uses, the judge is telling us that it's not an easy fix for this town meeting to graft onto our existing table, which is a mess, an organizational mess. And that what I'm hearing is that when we deal with the table for the fall town meeting, we have to address this issue. And that what I'm hearing or suggesting is, given that, we should probably not even do the housekeeping changes to Article 20 at this time. As much as we'd like to get low-hanging fruit out of the way.
Just nervous that it's going to go to the Attorney General, and because of this case that was decided after Cohasset's bylaw was accepted by the Attorney General, that they're going to then red flag it, and we don't want to do that.
Okay, so, and that we had been told, so that clarifies, we had been told, and it was accepted, that doing that overlay where we knew we were going to be putting the solar, that was sufficient, that would suffice. And
Yeah.
obviously the fact that they accepted that confirmed that, but now you're saying that there's been cases even where the Attorney General has previously approved the definition of an overlay district?
Well, it didn't deal with exactly a district that was an overlay district that was too small, but last year the court decided a case regarding the town of Waltham, where Waltham allowed solar energy facilities in their industrial district only. It wasn't an overlay district. And somebody came in who wanted to put solar on another lot that wasn't in the industrial district. And the city said, no, you can only do it in this other district. And when it went to court, the court determined that because the industrial district area in which solar energy facilities were permitted by right, I guess, was so small, and the city didn't provide for solar energy of any kind of facilities elsewhere in the city, that the ordinance had to be read as if it allowed solar everywhere. So, so now the Attorney General has that case law.
Okay.
And if you come in changing this particular zoning district provision, they will look at that district, and it's very possible, not that they might reject it, but they may red flag it. So in order to avoid all that, I'm just suggesting that maybe we should work on a more comprehensive approach to allowing solar energy under different circumstances. So you
Like
got
large
your
scale
large-
solar and then
and then the
house,
smaller scale.
residential type of scale solar,
Yeah, or
Yeah.
even.
and whatever might it be
visually.
in between.
Right.
Yes,
And
And
whether-
right now, none of
Run.
that's sorry.
Go ahead, Tanya. This is a free form meeting. We
Okay,
don't-
good. That's how our alternative.
We
energy
don't
meetings-
respect authority.
meetings are run as well, so, but I'll try to raise my hand going forward.
Clark had to leave, so unfortunately, but
Okay, so, I understand the risk. Right now, my understanding is that houses are putting on solar and commercial properties are able to go for permission, and it's a difference between asking for permission versus as of right siting.
Well, you don't, I think if the building inspector, its view is if you put a solar energy facility on the roof of your main building or next to it or whatever, he may treat it as an allowed accessory use to that, whatever that property is being used for, and may just go ahead and say, fine. The problem is going to be how big? And at what point is an accessory versus a second use? At what point is let's say, for example, a business comes in and they're putting in a new parking lot and they're covering the parking lot and they want the entire top to be covered with solar arrays. Is that an accessory use, or is that a sort of moderate scale, separate use that needs a special permit? So those are issues that it would be really helpful if your committee could sort of think about how you want these things, because they're coming. You know, there's no question. They're going to be coming, and your opportunity to get the best that you can get is now. And if we can do that in conjunction with the use regulation changes, we can really clarify what types of these are really truly accessory by right, which ones are sort of in the middle and they really require special review, and which ones are the real large scale commercial, you know, electrical generating commercial facilities that maybe are limited in where they can go. And where is that? How big an area will that be?
But in the meantime, just as today with our existing bylaw, we're running the risk that if, you know, let's say somebody wanted to put solar panels on the private landfill behind the drugstore, behind the hardware, King of Lumber, we're still at risk that could be allowed to happen, even though our district says it's only on our own landfill at the moment. So we're running that risk no matter what, and we can clean it up in the fall, you know, and broaden the overlay district where these things are allowed to where we want it. And, you know, in the draft that I did without knowing about this case, not talking to anybody, I did two things. One is to formally permit individual ones on the house, allow them, because we don't say it, although my neighbor has them, lots of people have them,
Right.
Probably as an accessory use. But like, for example, I passed one on the road where it's not on people's roof, it's a big giant panel in their yard, in an open
Right.
yard. You know, so that might be, you know, that's where we maybe start regulating where the house ones are. And then the other thing I did think in my draft was expanding where we allow these things. It's limited to what, the town landfill at the moment? Is that it?
No,
So,
so there's nothing that's, the town landfill is simply an as of right siting that was required in order to be able to get the green communities designation.
Right, okay.
That's it. It was just, all it was we won the green communities designation. In order to get that designation, we had to do an as of right siting somewhere. They didn't say how big, how little, however. And we knew we were moving forward with trying to do the old landfill. And so we just took it to the town because this was going to be the most controversial item out of 5 for the green communities designation, and said, we're already moving forward. You've already approved the old landfill solar energy array. So let's make that our as of right siting and move forward from there.
yeah.
And the town approved that. So it was a check the box green communities
Right,
requirement. It was approved by the Attorney General. Mass CEC had advised us that would suffice, that other towns had done it that way. But that's just an as of right siting, which is a very special right. There's no, I mean, I think we have to be careful about whether we're granting an as of right siting versus a zoning versus staying silent and requiring a special permit. And I
Well, you're
hear what
not
Judge,
requiring a special permit if you're silent. If you're silent, it's as of right or it's prohibited, and the court will interpret it as violating the exemption for solar.
unless it's an accessory.
Well, no, right now, again, it's very iffy. It's just the building inspector's interpretation. You got a different building inspector, or you get an appeal from his allowing one of these, and the ZBA change says, no, we don't think it's even allowed in the town. Then you got a lawsuit. Then you got the possibility of having it forced down your throat without any restrictions. My concern is, let's do it the way that Cohasset feels it works, so that you have requirements in there that limits height, limits setbacks, limits where it goes and how large it can be and that sort of thing. And if you decide that some places you can do it, but only with a special permit, we put that in there as well. You can still keep the as of right on the town land. It, it makes me nervous when you do that. You know, I'd rather just see the town exempt itself from zoning, but you know, that's a discussion for another day. I think you could leave what's there and then just require special permits elsewhere. You know, we can,
Yeah,
there
so
are
we-
a couple of models we can send you of how to, you know, how to address this, and you could look at them. But I guess I'm concerned about making just tweaks to what we have because it doesn't really resolve the true issues here.
Okay,
Right, well, let me ask you this, because I know we do have from a bylaw change that was proposed by the fire chief. We do have a setback on the roof to be able to give the fire department access onto the roof, so they're not stepping all over solar panels when they're trying to save a building. So
On-
that
on our-
is
In our current, is it in the current
Yes.
zone?
in the
so
current
he's,
zoning.
but it's a proposal or it's not in the zone?
No, it was approved and it should be incorporated. It was approved by the town, proposed by the fire chief and approved by the town a couple of years ago.
A few years ago. I wonder if it's a note that I missed, but again, it doesn't say specifically you're allowed to have it.
And right now, people are being approved for it. So are you saying that the zoning laws are silent on that and therefore the building inspector is taking under that
Well,
prerogative
he's
is
taking-
granting?
well, yeah, I mean, he's saying, you know, this is a standard above the roof facility. It's like having a, I don't know, an air conditioning unit or something like that. And he may be treating it that way, and that's fine. But you probably want to put into the bylaw exactly what is allowed and how large and
Right,
in
okay.
relation to the building.
Okay, because you had looked at, I think it's 19 or 20, the overlay district
Yeah,
on solar.
yes.
And there's nothing else in the zoning bylaws related to solar, including the setback for the roofs?
Nothing. Doesn't mention it.
No, I mean,
That's
the
understandable.
solar,
It's only been a thing in the last, you know, 10 years, probably.
I mean, the solar panels on a roof would have to comply with the height limits on a roof. And so if they're flat on the roof, it's probably not running afoul of that. If it was, you know, on a structure and attached to the roof, but it's standing up off the roof structure, then that might run into a height problem, but that's about it. So,
So
know,
it is
again-
allowed.
well,
Well-
again, it's
If
one of the reasons I wanted to include something specific about individual house and individual building panels is that it's not stated anywhere in the bylaw whether they're allowed or not. Our building inspector and his predecessor and I imagine in most towns are treating it as an allowable accessory use to a residential dwelling. But if we get to the ones like I saw that was residential, but it's a structure standing off in the yard, a big panels on a framework, or if we get into the more commercial size facilities, then I think we need to do some more careful regulation. And the judge is suggesting not to bring scrutiny upon us by the AG by just doing the easy housekeeping changes now. Let's just do it all at once. And, you know, this is the first time I'm hearing that suggestion, and I wholeheartedly agree with it. I think, you know, it's going to add to our workload for the fall, but, you know, I think this one ultimately is going to be an easy sell to the people in the community because it is the trend, it is what's coming at us. So, I
So
think, you
it-
know,
so it-
and then our use table, that table of uses in Article 4 is going to have a new line about solar uses and go across all the districts and say whether it's allowed by right or special permit or prohibited. And given the mess of our current table 4, the judge is telling us, and I would agree, it's not an easy fix to just plug in that line in the mess that we have now. When we comprehensively redo that table in the fall, we can just, this will be another use to add in there.
And we can, we can describe
So-
it.
And I think going forward is, so you see, there's a bunch of things going on. The judge maybe after tonight can summarize her thoughts on this, and your committee and this committee work closely through the summer to get this ready for prime time in the fall. On the
Right.
zoning bylaw committee, David, Cassie, are you okay with that approach of putting?
Yeah, I think that makes sense, Tom.
Who else agreed with that? I thought I heard enough.
He wants me to help him pick out PJs, but I said no.
Okay.
I think
And-
I think it
and
makes
just-
sense because the thing is when the building, when those coming from the building inspector for the solar, I mean, they're probably just looking at the same things if you were installing, a skylight or something in your home or doing any other roof work, and then it's just passing through that process, and that's it. So I think to get a little bit more denoted as to what the town wants to allow and what it doesn't, and especially when you get to the bigger ones. And the placement where they're supposed to go as well.
I mean, the big thing now is, and I've seen this in a number of occasions, I don't know if you have a lot of open farmland, but that's a prime place for a field of solar arrays for commercial generation. And the suggestion is, well, we're allowed to do this. You can't stop us. We can just fill the field and we can generate commercial electricity and sell it. And even if it's in a residential district. So what we want to do is just be very careful so that we've outlined the limitations and what's allowed and actually allow it, but it can be subject to reasonable regulation. And I think that's what we want to do.
And if what I was making a point for, if we're at risk for somebody else shoving a large field into town, we're at risk now.
Yes. you
And
are.
we're just carrying that same risk for a few more months till we get to the fall town meeting. So,
Yeah, and I will tell you, the risk until the town meeting is de minimis, because right now National Grid has put all new solar energy arrays on hold as far as the interconnection application is concerned, because they're doing a cluster study of the substation and the existing queue and all of that. So, and there is
Is that regional or is that statewide?
no, that's local.
Local.
That's basically Situate, Norwell, Cohasset, all the towns that are fed by that substation. But it is a strategy that National Grid has adopted statewide whenever applications are coming in too fast and furiously for them, and they just legally call a timeout by saying they have to do a cluster study to figure out what the implications are for their system. It's their break
Right.
that they
Yeah.
put onto things. So we're in the middle of a screeching halt with respect to National Grid and new solar energy projects. There is one that is under development on the Stop and Shop Plaza, right?
Mhm.
So just be aware that there's an active one underway that the town's examining the ability to take those credits. So it is being developed on the commercial property, the new Stop and Shop buildings, but the town has been offered the solar credits first. Whether or not we take them, it doesn't matter, because they still want to proceed and they still have a market to sell those credits. So there is an actual project underway that is
And
going to be
that's
subject
not,
to
and
this.
it's unregulated. So that's the issue. And that's what you don't want is a proliferation.
all right.
Right, and also we looked at, and I don't know if there's still economic, but at the time, 2020, when we put out the RFP, the parking structures were coming in to be fairly economic. So we'll have to address the parking structures as well, make sure that that 15 feet doesn't preclude them or
Right.
whatever. And I think as a town, we have to be very careful about, what limits are we going to be placing on commercial?
Exactly. Right.
Especially because there are benefits to the town of having the solar. Our substation, our feeder lines are almost 100% at capacity.
Mm.
And if as part of this, they pay for the upgrades, which they may be required to, you know, there's a benefit all around. But anyway, so these are the things that we as the Alternative Energy Committee have been monitoring and looking at, and I understand the set aside the overlay district, which had one specific purpose. I
Mhm.
understand from Judge Cutler that other than that, there's pretty much silence, and that could be misinterpreted in a way that the town does not like. And
Right.
therefore, by putting in something, and based on the example and the precedent that you cited, it needs to be broad enough
Mhm.
that it's not just the industrial district.
Right.
It might not, in
Right.
3A might not even be enough. I mean, I don't know how you determine how much you have to allow.
Yeah.
And then on the homes, you know, yes, it is coming. It is.
And I, you know, just off the top of my, the homes are easy. I think the stuff that's flat on the roof, that's as of right. Maybe the structures like the one I passed in somebody's yard that's on a, you know, a frame and it's cantilever, you can't see what I'm doing. It's up like this, you know, off the ground. You know, maybe that's a special permit.
Yeah.
Certainly the large facilities will all be special permits, and site plan reviews and the whole bit that we do for commercial properties. And the municipal, you know, if we want to slap panels on the roofs of all the schools and stuff, I would say as of right, knock yourself out, you know, but again, getting ahead of ourselves. So we'll leave it that Judge Cutler, if you could give us some of your organizing thoughts about what we talked about and what directions we should go. And then Tanya, you and I will stay in touch and our committees work together over the, you know, we're going to be kind of busy up to this town meeting in May. May 1st is town meeting, you know, so May 2nd, we're kicking off into getting ready for the fall. But so we'll catch up, but, you know, and I, you know, again, the one that I drafted, you can ignore it, but one of the other hallmarks of that, no, don't ignore it. Actually, I like it. One of the other goals of this bylaw is to get a lot of administrative crap out of it into regulations, because regulations can be changed easier. So you will see in the draft that I did that a lot of the stuff, the application process, decommissioning, maintenance, all of that out. Put them in a regulation, and if the state of the art and these different things changes, they're easily changed. We don't have to go to town meeting to change a bylaw. That's the thought about that. Now, your committee look at it, tell me, no, this should really stay in the bylaw. Judge Cutler may say this should stay in the bylaw. But let's also think about that principle of getting junk out of the bylaw and stuff that's not
Right.
junk in the sense that if it's something that it's technology dependent and may change quickly over time, better to deal with that as a regulation than as a bylaw and having to come to town meeting, get a 2/3 vote and the whole bit.
Yeah, but I mean, speaking of getting junk out, I think the decommissioning specifically that you reference and the financial surety to enable that decommissioning, nobody wants a bunch of unused, non-turning wind.
No, they'd be
sitting around.
regulations, but I'm saying that the requirements for decommissioning and the financial sureties, that might be the kind of thing that changes over time. And I don't know that. It's not my technical field.
You said
So
divide it
I'm-
up and require the decommissioning, require the bond, and then you can set up regulations that help guide how much of a bond and what kind
something
of a
like that.
bond.
Right, that's what I'm trying to get at. So think about that. We'll think about, and that the same goes for the wind article, and the same goes for a lot of other articles we're looking at too, is to move administrative and application type stuff out to the extent we can.
Right,
All
and
right.
and let me ask on the wind, is that also being pushed?
No, yeah, we're gonna discuss wind next, so that's next.
Oh,
So on-
okay,
So
okay.
on 20,
Got
on
it.
20, it's a consensus of the group that we're going to move us all to the fall with a comprehensive review. Cassandra, if you and Lauren, you heard the thing about whatever the fire chief got passed at town meeting a couple of years ago, if you could find that, somebody find it and pass
Sure.
it along to Judge Cutler, and so we know what they did. I don't recall that, but that's not saying it didn't happen. All right, so now on the wind article, I'll start with my own other thing about the wind. The major change for me for the wind was to allow for individual scale windmills on houses and buildings. Right now, the only thing we permit are large wind turbine facilities. Where we cite them, I don't know that I had any strong thoughts about that, but I had a thought of, as we go to a alternative energy future, you do see in some places, they may not, I mean, we're a windy part of the country, but you don't see them often, but sometimes you see small individual turbines on a house or an office building. I wanted to be able to permit those. And again, we may need to fine tune how we do that. What I wrote, I threw out a size, it was arbitrary. What would I say? I saw that the large one was so many gigawatts, I put 500 or less. I have no idea. I'm not the techie on that one, but the principle of that, I'd like to see us carry forward with that, so that going forward, people in the town maybe have not just solar as an alternative, but might have wind as an alternative to power their house. I don't know what anybody, or Tanya or anybody on the committee thinks about that. Nothing, silence.
I don't really
So
have a
that
comment
would be in the
on
use.
wind.
Hmm?
I don't really have a comment on wind.
Well,
Yes,
there's
I'm blowing off a lot of hot of it air right now.
There's no worries about allowing the individual wind turbines. We can save that issue as an accessory facility that we address when you change Article 4 and 5 in the fall. But
And is the concern from not being able to regulate it, or is it a concern because of the aesthetic? What's the?
No, the concern is right now we don't allow it, so it's not an option for people.
So
It's not-
the new regulation would be able to permit for it.
Well,
So this
for example, when we were talking about solar, for example, we do not permit specifically individual panels on your house.
Yeah.
The building inspector is allowing them as an accessory use. I have not seen an individual wind turbine on somebody's house, and I don't know what the building inspector would do with that, because that generally will stick up, not flat on the roof. It will be up, and it may run into height problems and all other kinds of problems. But I would like to craft a bylaw where we allow it as a use, maybe by special permit. We'll get there, but
Yep.
So you don't.
that we just have an option of other than just solar.
So right now, with your Article 19, you only address large scale facilities.
Right.
And that's fine, but it leaves a hole elsewhere. And I think you should look at that when you're looking at the use regulations.
So
But
you're
for-
suggesting we put that issue too off?
Well,
I'm
just
sorry.
the individual ones. I think you can, if you want to clean up, if you can decide on cleaning up, you don't have to, the wind energy conversion facility, large scale ones in Article 19. I don't know, Tanya, if you were given a copy of our diagnostic report,
I'm sorry if I've given a what?
a copy of our diagnostic report where we listed the sort of questions and issues that we found. that
I
we
think
might
I
wanna
was,
figure
right,
out.
Tom, you gave that.
Yeah,
to
I did
me.
give you the.
Yep,
There's only
diagram.
about 6 of them, and what we were hoping for was some kind of response, maybe from the committee to some of the questions, so that we can make whatever tinker changes we need to make to they're really clarification things more than anything else. And so we're just sort of noting things like a noise test, and exactly when is that to be performed? Is it a requirement, or is it at the option of the applicant? We want to clarify those things. So if you could just take a look at those 6 items and just sort of a
Yep.
shorthand, this is what we want, or this is what we need, or this is what it's supposed to mean, then we can sort of tinker with the language to make sure you have what you thought you were getting.
Okay, so this one I can give you some history too. Again, it was sort of like a single purpose bylaw. Before I joined the Alternative Energy Committee in the aughts, so like 2005 to 7, Turkey Hill was potentially going to have a wind turbine put on it. And that created a lot of angst among people whose houses were below it and they were going to see it, and even houses that weren't within the shadow and flickering and oh
It
my
was the
goodness.
people actually came to town meeting with pictures of what it would look like sitting on the beach, and it was going to interfere them while they were sitting on the damn beach. I couldn't believe that. But anyway, you're right.
Yeah,
People
no,
too.
and as a result, and this is, I think, where, Tom, we need to be careful about what we put into regulations versus what we put into the bylaw.
Yep.
As a result, a number of the residents that were against the turbine commandeered the Alternative Energy Committee and put forward the existing language for the bylaw tied to the wind. And it was put together in a way that would allow the wind turbine, but set such restrictions on it that that one particular facility and any other future large wind turbines could not be built in Cohasset. And because I think you probably did see as well, the compensation for any reduction in value associated with the properties surrounding the turbine. And the whole, how, you know, and I'm not saying it's not the right set of setbacks, right? You don't want a wind turbine falling and hitting, but that's also where the flicker tests and the audio tests came in. It was just, there were a lot of very concerned residents which thought they were near to where the wind turbine was going to be on Turkey Hill, that they wanted to make sure that they could control where wind turbines were being built. And at that time, it was where solar is today, right? You could see it coming down the pipe. Hull had put one up, Situate was putting them up, and there were very concerned residents. And so that was the genesis of this. Again, it was before I joined. In fact, I took over as the chair back. I've had 2 stints on the Alternative Energy Committee, and I had joined because solar started to be, once that got passed, there was no more interest by that team that had commandeered the committee. So I ended up coming on board. So I think it's just important to understand why these things are in there, and then understand where we are today and understand what was incredibly controversial back in 2008 to 10 or 11, whenever it was passed.
Yeah.
And, you know, just make sure that we're cognizant of the realities of our town while still being cognizant of the realities of technological movement and the state's intentions with respect to decarbonizing. Also,
nobody
Tom,
lives, the thing is, nobody lives near Turkey Hill. Judge Cutler, I don't know if you're aware, the one in Situate that's on the Driftway, there is a house near it. And those folks have made a stink, I think, a lawsuit. I don't think it went anywhere. I mean, a lot of that, I remember pointing out a time on social media that every other Thanksgiving, half the town of Cohasset is standing right underneath the turbine out in Hull at the football game. And nobody's ever been killed by flying ice or driven mad by flicker and all. I just find these arguments ridiculous that, you know, yes, we will face them, but you know, we have to, I think, prepare the town for the future. You know, I'm sure, you know, in the 1900s, I'm sure somebody said, oh, look at all these telephone poles, they're butt ugly. You know, and the ones in our village are, by the way, very butt ugly, and we had an opportunity to put them on the ground. That's another story. But, you know, eventually over time, you ignore these things. And when I brought back my son from college, grad school in Canada, we were going from London, Ontario to Detroit to cross over. That part of Ontario between those 2 cities there are thousands of them in the landscape, thousands, as far as the eye can see. And like, how is that offensive? And that part of Canada is being fueled by wind power. You know, I don't know where people come from, but it's good to point out that we had the opposition. It was crazy. But,
well, with that one, without trying to rehash the history on it, I think there, at the time, it went in front of the planning board, and the planning board meetings, instead of having about 3 or 5 people, had between 100, probably 200 people to meetings, when they had to move their meeting to the old town hall, and all those seats were filled. So it was quite a controversial thing at the time. But they did have, it wasn't just, oh, this is going to happen. I mean, they had studies regarding flicker and all these other things at the time. I wasn't on the planning board. I was on the Concom at the time. And I remember we looked at our our planning board compadres and says, boy, we're glad we're not on the planning board having to do this every night. But it was, so I mean, I think you got to just see what is in, you know, the technology is probably 12 years down the road and the like. So what, you know, what are other towns doing with this, and then seeing what might be appropriate.
Are-
I'm running
Because
out
the
of
mo-
time.
Because the most likely thing is that, you know, if one's to be built, it's more likely going to be with on a commercial setting than a residential, even if it is a smaller one. So I think the concern would be every resident would say, oh my goodness, somebody's going to put a windmill in the house next to me, when in reality it's more likely going to be in a commercial setting because of
Yeah.
the investment in it and things like that. So
Yeah, the big turbines are gonna be in 3A at best, you know, in one or two spots.
yeah,
Uh,
because you have to, you know, it's
That
where
is-
you're going to get the wind and all that stuff. So.
Are any of your 6 points that you made in the diagnostic, Judge Cutler, are there any of them addressing the permitting requirements? Or so
No.
you're
they're
not
really-
suggesting
they're
any of
covered-
these restrictive changes that were the restrictive bylaw that we have that essentially, Tanya, you're saying we couldn't permit one?
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
I think if the committee has some ideas about either adjusting those requirements or adding others or subtracting some or whatever, you know, the sooner we find out about those, the better, because time's running out. If we're going to draft something, we have to draft
Well,
it pretty.
This would definitely be for the fall, you know, not the,
Well,
not the.
yeah, already the part about the individual, allowing for individual ones would be the fall. Cassandra, when's our next meeting? What's our February schedule? Yeah,
Sorry,
Okay.
wasn't allowing me to unmute. So the next meeting is next Wednesday, but then there's technically the forum on Monday.
Monday when? No, I'm talking the zoning bylaw February meetings.
Oh, for February, so next Wednesday, which I think is the 1st.
I
Okay,
can't
do we-
make it. I have eye surgery that day. And I won't be able
Okay.
to.
Do we have another one, a second one in February?
Let me look.
It's President's Day too.
My computer is being very slow
Alright.
and does not want to respond, so I can get back to you and Judge
All right, well,
Cutler with the date.
let's do this for the moment then. When is your committee's next meeting, Tom?
February 9th.
Okay. All right.
We will definitely put this
Oh, all
on.
right, so yeah, why don't we do this? You look at Judge Cutler's 6 points in the diagnostic,
Yep.
and you get back to us after your meeting on the 9th, as quickly as you can.
And
We
any
will-
other.
We will probably, what we're planning to do is to roll out these articles to the public in a form before we start going through the process of approvals with the various boards and before town meeting, to get some feedback and see what people think. If we're going to do something on wind, that would be in a forum in late February where we'd have a text of something we're going to write. So it'd have to be fairly quick. But if, again, as much as I don't want to keep piling on to the fall town meeting, only because I know that's going to lead to then spreading this into Springtown meeting next year, which I do not want to see happen. This isn't fatal if we push this off. And the critical part to me of allowing for individual sized turbines is going to be put off anyway.
Right.
But-
I mean, and I think we have to be cognizant also of the offshore wind issue, right? And the zoning for that. I don't know if anybody wants to see wind turbines on the Grampuses, although it could probably make things a little bit safer from a trunk voter's point of view.
It's my personal thing is I don't find them offensive to look at or see, but
Right.
I don't know.
But there are
that-
people
can
who
we-
do.
Can we zone out there? Judge Cutler, that it's the Grampuses are a bunch of rocks right off. the
On
coast.
privately owned flats, yeah, above the mean high water.
These are,
They're
this is,
below.
this is a piece of ledge out off the coast. It's not
Yeah.
even a mile out, but,
I'm not, I don't think you're gonna have control over that. I think that's the state jurisdiction.
okay.
I think,
Tom, sorry to interrupt you, Judge Cutler. I just wanted to make note that the next meeting after the 1st isn't until the 22nd of February.
okay,
All right, and then we were gonna hopefully squeeze in a forum, maybe the 29th or something like that.
27th.
27th, which is a Wednesday,
It's a Monday,
Monday. 22nd is a Wednesday,
correct?
and that's not conflicting with the planning board. Okay.
Correct.
All right. So if we are going to bring something forward to this town meeting, it would have to be kind of ready for this committee to vote on by the 22nd of February. So let's focus for the moment on Judge Cutler's diagnostic and her 6 points. And like she said, though, if on the current restrictions that are so restrictive on the large term runs, you really feel strongly about bringing something forward, we'll be glad to bring that forward for you, but you might have to defend it at town meeting yourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this, we as the Alternative Energy Committee, we're not even focused on wind. Like, we aren't even putting out requests for proposals because the economics are so tilted right now towards solar. And
Right.
hydrogen, frankly, I mean, something for us to think about, and I don't know, Judge Cutler, if anybody else is looking at hydrogen
I haven't seen.
or other distributed energy resources like the fossil fuel, natural gas fired backup generators or oil fired generators or gasoline fired generators. I don't even know if we have bylaws right now on that, but there
No,
are
I-
tons of those in town.
Wood burning. Yeah, yeah, I know there's a lot of issues out there, and I think that's something that you're gonna have to look for in the near future rather than the long term. On the solar, I just want to mention for any committee members, you might take a look at for 2 examples of how sort of a more comprehensive addressing of solar. I know, let me just think now, the town of, I want to say, it's up in the northern part. I'll come up with 2 towns that I think might have examples of 2 different ways of treating them. And, just see if those approaches, are any possibilities or ideas. And I know Tom had some ideas. So, I think putting some heads together, I think we can come up with something pretty good.
And Judge Cutler, are you familiar with the specialized net zero code? The net zero stretch code?
I'm aware of it. I haven't applied it.
Right, so that was passed in December. We haven't looked at, well, we have it on our schedule to look at it next.
This is for the
it was a
building code. This is in relation to the building code. Yeah.
Building code and the whole net zero thing. And, I just want to make sure, I don't know if we're going to recommend that we move forward with that at this point, but it might be, I just don't know if that goes into, I guess that's a building code, not a zoning code issue, right?
Yeah.
That's different.
Steve's copied me on some of his emails about that. He's hot to trot for the planning board to look at it too, but it wouldn't be in a zoning bylaw. I don't see it needing to be in a zoning
I mean,
bylaw.
you may want to make sure we're not doing anything that conflicts, but if
So let me ask you, is it possible that the fire chief's proposal with respect to the setbacks on the rooftops tied to solar are in the building code?
they may be in the other, maybe another section of the town code, not zoning. Or it may be that it was put on there, not necessarily related to solar facilities, but maybe for any kind of rooftop facilities. So that could have been it too. And that's why.
That'd be-
Okay, so I
It'll
think
be
we
a good
should,
idea to include that once we redo our
Mhm.
setback tables.
If that is- Yeah, exactly.
well, and I think also, I'm gonna go now and take a look at the total code and all the codes that the town has and see where that went, because I wonder if there's other I don't think there were a lot of things in addition to that setback for purposes of the fire department and police department and to be able to be on the roof of homes when there's an emergency situation. However, something for us to think about is what lands in zoning, what lands on building codes, right? And maybe there is something on building codes already which says you can do it, but it has to meet these following requirements. So there might be not an as of right setting, but a permission
Right.
that would, I think, resolve some of your concerns, your rightful concerns. I might add, Judge Cutler. Selectman Crane, hello. You're on mute, but it's always a pleasure to see you.
Yeah, keep them on mute.
Yeah, well, Mr. Callahan, I said nice things about you as well. And if you think you're the first one to say that, I've been at meetings since 8:30 this morning, so I apologize. But if I'm not too sharp, well, it's like usual. Anyway,
Well,
Go
we got through some good things, and I will bring you up to speed with the select board tomorrow night of what we're doing with wind and solar, but a lot is being moved off. We might get some housekeeping on wind for this town meeting, but that's it. Solar needs a little deeper dive. And we resolved tonight that the judge and myself, this committee and the Alternative Energy Committee are going to work together to get something state of the art for the fall. So, all right, if anybody doesn't have any other questions, comments to Tanya, sorry.
Tanya, that's right. Hey, Tom, one question I had with
Yeah.
respect to the drafts that you sent, and I know they're going to be revised. Are those in addition to, I was just trying to figure out how to reconcile them with the existing. Do they replace? Do they extend?
Well, what I drafted was, you saw there's a lot of that moving that stuff out. Mine was like a replace, and again, ignore the section numbers because that was in the framework of how I originally wanted to reorganize the entire bylaw, which may or may not happen, but I believe though in what I did was take the existing and redlined out where the changes are. So it should be the existing and where I made changes to it. And in
So like
red.
a section.
You can ignore that for the moment in the other than that it's just one windy person's idea, of things to do. And you've already responded that maybe not everything should move out to regulations, for example, and we're going to study further the individual things, but
Right. Okay, well,
yeah.
so I was just trying to understand how to read it in the context of the existing bylaw because of the
It should
numbering.
be the existing bylaw with a lot of red lines on it, is the way I think I put it together.
Okay, and if something is .11, but no .11 exists now, that's a new
Yeah,
dot.
no, forget it. That had to do with a reorganization of the bylaw into different articles and sections than exist today. Just ignore
Okay.
those numbers. The text should all be from the existing with a bunch of red lines in it. But for the purposes of our meeting on the 22nd, focus on Judge Cutler's comments.
Okay, perfect.
If anything else jumps out at you, again, if there's
Yeah.
something in what I wrote that has some brilliance to it, then bring it. I encourage you to bring it forward.
Okay,
I
Very good.
doubt it because I'm not a techie on these things either, and you guys have more of the technological resources to know about all this stuff. So, but thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you, Tanya.
Appreciate it.
thank you, everybody, and thank you, Judge Cutler, for your
Thank you.
review and your questions. We appreciate it, for
Right.
sure.
Right.
Okay,
Thanks. All right. Take care.
Yeah.
thanks.
You're welcome to stay if you want, but. All right. So Jack, we discussed, we have finalized what we're doing with Article 8. With
Good.
Article 3. Article 3 is the districts and the maps, and it's possible we may indefinitely postpone them if we don't have the map data up to snuff. We're trying to basically do an interim update of the map. There's 2 overlay districts that were never incorporated into the existing map. Clark had also pointed out, he was here earlier, that perhaps the open space for that Whitney Woods rail spur never got put on the map. So Other than that, we're gonna go forward with the housekeeping changes to Article 3. So we skipped to 19 and 20 with Tanya coming here. So right now, we're gonna go back to our final review vote on the changes to Article 6, which is our sign regulations. If you recall from last time, we were going to study and put off for the future our regulations on political signs and speech and all of that stuff. But for going forward for now, we were going to do some housekeeping changes, and Judge Cutler, you tell me if we are also going to put in some missing dimensional regulations that we do not have. We do not have, we do not have setback or height limits on the sizes of our signs, believe it or not, so.
Right, and I'm just looking for my, I told you I had them all in folders marked and.
Yeah, no, and jumping around hasn't helped.
Okay, so on Article 6, I did address, I didn't change the regulation necessarily, but I did address the issue of political or other non-commercial speech signs. So I don't know if people had a chance to look at that. I didn't redline anything because I really sort of rewrote and rearranged so much that it wouldn't have made any sense to redline it. But it's essentially your same regulations completely reorganized so that they're logically grouped. And then I added in some restrictions for the height and the size of signs that hadn't been mentioned before. But addressing the political or other non-commercial signs was an important aspect because political signs are one thing and your current definition doesn't cover necessarily things like just, you know, a political viewpoint that one wants to put out there, or a religious conviction that one wants to put on a sign. And that's all protected free speech. And I just wanted to clarify that political and other non-commercial messages protected by the First Amendment are all grouped into that the sign. And so I just sort of changed the name to non-commercial speech signs.
Right, so that's an edit we're gonna be putting forward. Yeah.
The other edit, and I want to point this out because if you don't like it, I'll take it out. So right now, under your current bylaw, a posting sign, an identification sign of a certain size, and a political signs, those don't require any kind of sign permit whatsoever. I sort of modified that a little bit, and I said a temporary real estate sign wouldn't require a sign permit. Because what we don't want is someone putting up a permanent, you know, this property is forever under lease, you know, or available for lease, you know. So I wanted to have that at least be permitted if it was going to go up.
Yeah.
And it has to
Excuse
be.
me, Judge Cutler, can we move back just a little bit? I would suggest on the other signs that we might say viewpoint signs to clarify that what we mean is viewpoint, or we could say protected viewpoint signs. So that's very clear. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
I had a definition. I put them in with, did I add them in? I think I
Did I forward that to everybody? I hope I did. Did I forward the Article 6 stuff? Think so.
I think I read it.
Yeah, no, I did. It
But
looks
there were
like
also sign definitions that went with it. And I don't think I printed them out or not. It's defined, but
Yeah,
But-
the non-political sign, it's a non-commercial sign. It says a sign which expresses the view of the owner or occupant of a premises concerning political, religious, or ideological matters, or a sign containing any other expression of non-commercial speech protected by the United States Constitution.
Okay,
It's pretty all-encompassing.
right, which is what we want. We want to just make it very clear.
All right.
And it's, and the temporary political sign, which is the next definition after it, is a temporary non-commercial sign announcing or advertising the person's candidacy for public office or advocating for or against the election of a candidate, or a temporary sign advocating for a particular vote on a public issue determined to be by the electorate or otherwise pending before a public body. So that's that's what a temporary political sign is.
So those would not require a permit. They can be up for 30 days or up to 60 days in a year. No permit required. Anything else, if somebody wants to put up a permanent Jesus Saves sign on their property, they're gonna have to meet the sign height requirements, the sign size requirements, and they're gonna have to get a permit that says, yes, you meet those requirements, not what the content is, but just the
The other
structure.
Sure.
And then the other thing was, we had talked about, we hadn't made any decision on last time, was I was suggesting that we exempt signs erected and maintained by the town, the Commonwealth, or the US government on any land, building, or structures in use by those entities. Just so that the town, you know, like, I mean, we don't want to have to deal with the state on that. They're probably exempt anyway, and the town certainly doesn't want to have to come in and out for sign permits every time
Right.
they have a DPW sign that has to go up. So, or do you think that would be
Yeah, that's fine. I think
annoying to
that's-
the electorate to exempt the town?
Yeah. Especially when we have such a remarkably well-run town.
Right.
Just couldn't test.
So my only question is we have a lot of signs in town regarding signups of things. It could be for a whole host of things. It could be for baseball, soccer, you name it. What would that just be a non-commercial sign, or what would that be kind of? fall under?
You allow event signs and, you know, all kinds of things that are just temporary, and they're banners or whatever.
Yeah.
Technically speaking, people just can't go around putting up signs on the telephone poles, you know, or if they're on a public bulletin board, you know, that's perfectly fine.
Mm.
I mean, you know, I don't think your current sign bylaw does not address them unless they become an issue. You probably want to leave it alone. If it's a big, huge thing, it's going to come under the banner heading.
Yeah, no, I'm talking more that your temporary, they're almost the size of political signs, but they would be for either signups. They could also be for yard sales as well.
Well, you don't deal with yard sale signs, but they're temporary accessory signs to the
Okay.
property. So I think that would be okay.
Okay.
They're limited in size and number. Yeah. So the signs prohibited in all district, that kind of grouped together all the sign. I would like you, I really would like it if you could make sure that I have everything in there and didn't lose anything when I reorganized this, but I was pretty careful. I separated out things that were absolutely prohibited from those things that are restrictions and limitations that are applicable in all districts, such as illumination limitations for non-residential premises, such as no signs posted on a utility pole or tree, things of that sort. And then I grouped together signs allowed in all districts. That's political and other non-commercial signs. That is street banners or temporary non-accessory signs, advertising entertainments, public events, and so forth. That's temporary accessory signs. And so that would be something accessory to the premises. And that could be anything that's accessory to the premises. If you're gonna have a yard sale on your property, you can put your yard sale sign up. You just can't put it up for your neighbor or somebody else. Posting signs, which is, you know, no trespassing, no hunting, or what have you. Directional signs, which really sort of say one way, you know, parking here or no parking, or this is entrance, exit. Those are sort of allowed. in any district if they're accessory to the property. And for the planning board, site plan review, the planning board will be looking at where those are placed on the property to make sure that they're correct. Holiday now this was a question I had. Holiday decorations with or without lights containing no advertising. Should that be allowed? This is something new, hadn't mentioned it. Should that be allowed in all districts? Technically, under your broad definition of sign, holiday decorations can be a sign. Yeah. Big Santa Claus on the roof or something is technically a sign under your sign bylaw. So do you want to say holiday decorations are allowed in all districts, or do you want to be silent on it as you are now?
I think the issue really is that we have a lot of people for Christmas and Halloween.
Mhm.
They're really having some pretty elaborate signs, and everybody's having a very good time with it. And I see that they stay up afterwards. So, we could remain silent, which allows, because I don't see any abuses at this point. I think we could reserve addressing it later on, but, Judge Cutler, I mean, in your experience, how does that kind of play out? I mean, are we better off just not leaving it alone because we don't see an abuse?
I think the other way to handle it is to exclude that from the definition of sign, but you also have some restrictions in your current bylaw against businesses having sort of lights and things up during the holidays, that they're restricted only during a period of time. So if you're going to do that, that is holiday decorations in a sense, so we have to address them. I just felt rather than limiting, you can't put them up before Thanksgiving Day and you can't take them down, until after January 1st. I mean, that sort of limits what holidays you're talking about. It could be a July 4th holiday that people put up lights or some kind of decorations. And I'd say be silent or exclude them from purely, and I'm talking about purely decorational, no promotional stuff.
Yeah,
I don't think it's abused anywhere in town right now.
no.
Yeah.
I
Just be
believe it,
silent on
I
Be
think
I
silent.
believe it's silent, yeah.
Yeah,
Just be silent? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So signs allowed in residential districts, in addition to all those general ones, are 2 accessory signs identifying a home occupation or other lawful accessory use of the premises. So a professional, a dentist, or whatever. 1 unlighted temporary sign advertising the sale, lease, construction, or repair of the premises. So if somebody, has a contractor on their property and they have, plumbing by so-and-so, I guess that would technically be a temporary sign that's permitted. 1 identification sign located at the front entrance of the principal building on the premises or in the front yard. That's currently, that is allowed. And then I put the following, these are new. So these are the height, setback, and surface area regulations applying to signs in the residential districts. No sign larger than 2 square feet in area may be placed within 15 feet of any property line unless attached to a building, except accessory signs. Okay. And accessory signs are limited in size and also I think they're limited. I think they do say accessory signs not over 2 square feet. So in the signs permitted in all districts, limited temporary accessory signs to the time period. Posting signs are limited to 2 square feet. Directional signs are limited to 1 square foot. And then in the residential districts, you can have the other accessory signs no larger than 2 square feet in area within 15 feet of any property line, and no sign may exceed 6 square feet in area at all, wherever they are on the property. And then no freestanding sign, and this was my question because we hadn't dealt with height yet. No freestanding sign may exceed 10 feet in height as measured from what? The existing grade, the mean grade. We haven't figured that out yet. We could just leave it in height for now because we're going to be defining height, hopefully. So those were my suggestions. Right now, among the prohibited signs are any sign that's attached to the building and goes above the roof line. You can't have that. But basically, under this set of regulations, you can't have any sign on a residential property that's larger than 6 square feet.
Right.
Now,
Okay.
if you want to make that 10 square feet, if you want to make it 5 square feet or whatever, we can do that. And this is just, I've looked at a number of bylaws across the state and sort of looked to see what the general approach was, and 6 square feet seemed to be it.
I'd leave it. And the next one, the 10 feet at height is measured from, I would say, existing grade.
From existing grade.
Yeah.
Okay, then in the
And
business,
that existing should mean, no, you don't put a pile of dirt and then put the 10-foot sign on top of a pile of
the
dirt.
natural grade or the existing or natural grade. I mean, that's why we could just say in height, because we're going to be defining height as how you determine it at the base or the foundation.
Yeah, all right, that's fine. Yeah.
Signs allowed in business and light industry districts. This is pretty much what you allow: 1 accessory sign for each tenant of the building, 1 other accessory sign, and I put in there either attached or freestanding, or not exceeding 40 square feet in area, or for each 200 feet of frontage on a public street. I think that's what you have now. 1 directory of establishments with cannot exceed 1 square foot of area for each establishment listed. 1 identification sign not exceeding 6 square feet of area at the front of the entrance, 1 unlighted temporary sign advertising the sale or lease of the premises. And in the business districts, and this was each premises, we talked about this last time, each premises may display 1 decorative or emblematic cloth flag no larger than 20 square feet. You just say 1 sign, 1 flag without lettering. So I called it a decorative or emblematic cloth flag. Such flag may extend over the sidewalk. This is the existing regulations, provided it extends no closer than 2 feet from the curb line and no lower than 8 feet above the sidewalk. And then flags containing advertising copy or other written messages may be displayed only as a temporary sign. You have in your current bylaw, flags with lettering can only be displayed as a temporary sign. So I just said with advertising or other written messages on it.
Yeah.
So you could have a flag with a flower on it, or you could have a flag maybe with a logo on it or something like that, but without writing. But you can't have any kind of message on it unless it's just put in as a temporary flag. I don't know if that's what you wanted, or it's pretty much what you have now.
Yeah.
And then in those business districts, the other regulations that would apply is no sign can be located closer than 15 feet to any property line, and no freestanding sign may exceed 20 feet in height. Now, the no sign closer than 15 feet could be problematic if you only have a 10-foot setback and the sign's attached to the building. So you may want to make that
Say unless on the building,
unless,
unless attached to the building.
yeah, unless attached to the building, I guess.
Okay.
So those would be the new
Well,
regulations.
wait, say that again.
So
No sign may exceed 20 feet in height. And you want to say except as attached to the building?
no sign may be located closer than 15 feet to the
Oh, I'm
property
sorry.
line
Well, I'm reading the wrong
unless
sentence.
attached to a building.
Yep. Sorry.
Does that work?
Yeah.
And then no freestanding sign. Remember, there's already a general requirement that no sign can go higher than the roof line of the building to which it's attached. But no freestanding sign, don't have any limitation on that. They exceed 20 feet in height as measured. And then directional signs cannot exceed 4 feet in height.
Okay,
Does that work?
works for me. Anybody else have any thoughts, comments, questions?
No, I
No.
mean, from what we've discussed, that sounds fine.
Is this something that the Chamber of Commerce is gonna weigh in on, or?
Rarely do they offer opinions at town meeting, rarely
Okay,
if ever.
okay,
Not super concerned about it.
all right.
I haven't ever heard the chamber, somebody can correct me, I haven't ever heard the chamber take any strong positions about signs either way.
Okay,
Well, you know, we only allow backlit signs, we don't allow neon, so, you know,
Right.
I've heard of other chambers who go to the mat over neon signs.
right,
They've never
I-
challenged that or questioned that here, so.
right. So that's still in here in signs prohibited in all districts. The other thing I kind of tinkered with a little bit, is right now you say no mechanical signs, which seemed kind of vague. I couldn't tell what that was. I put, except for displays of time, temperature, or fuel prices, mechanical signs, signs with moving parts, changing or scrolling images or parts, and signs which create the illusion of movement are prohibited.
Yeah.
So you already prohibited most of those, but you didn't exclude time and
You
temperature.
don't see moving signs much anymore. There used to
You
be
don't see-
gas
Used to be-
stations.
used to be the ones that
had-
spin
their
around, yeah.
logos would spin, but you
Yeah,
don't see
yeah.
that
Yeah.
even
You don't
anymore.
really see that, yeah. But I didn't want to say, technically the little pump changing numbers is a sign, believe it or not. Um,
Okay,
So that's pretty much it. It doesn't really change a lot other than the dimensional requirements and just sort of expanding what is allowed as a political, non-commercial free speech sign. Everything else is pretty much as it was, but I would really dearly love it if you could just give it a once over, compare it
Yeah.
with what we have and make sure that you're happy that everything, we didn't lose anything in the translation here.
all right.
All
Okay.
right. It was just so much moving around. I just thought it would make no sense to redline it because you wouldn't really wouldn't be able to
All right,
tell.
well,
what-
what we'll do is, everybody give it one more time, and at our meeting on the 1st, we'll take a quick vote on approving the article.
Sure.
As you've drafted it.
And then the sign, I sent you some.
And
sign-
we will meet on the 1st, but Judge Cutler, obviously, you won't need to be there for the 1st, so
Right.
I think, well, we'll talk before you leave,
Okay.
on the scheduling things.
Right. Also, I noted that there were some definitional suggestions that I sent to you, so I'm hoping that we can talk about those on the 1st as well, as to whether or not those get incorporated.
Into the,
Whether they're included in the warrant article, so they.
the Word document that was attached.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, the other thing I also wanted to note on those articles, on those definitions in Articles 2, is that I've prepared a warrant article for the Article 12 amendments that we talked about and you approved last time. And I added in there the change to Article 4. I wanted to highlight this. Remember, there was a mistake in Article 4 where
Right.
the
Right, I
town
saw that you,
put in, so we're correcting that. I think technically we could just take it out of the next printing, but just I'd
Yeah.
rather
Well, that's-
just be safer than sorry. And then the other thing was I added in that some definitions that I thought we had talked about. You had pretty much agreed on last week, the site plan review definitions, the special permit granting authority, the special permit, the variance in the zoning act. All of those are just slightly rewritten from what you have, and you agreed on them last time. And we added the site plan review.
Okay,
So that should cover everything related to Article 12, all in one article, if that works for you.
good. Yeah,
Okay?
just a question of simply explaining it to people.
Yep.
Um,
Now,
okay.
on that, would it help if we could annotate the new provisions and say, you know, let's say the new section 8.3 C, section 8.6 in the current bylaw? Would that,
Well, for the slides to roll this out, which would probably be the same slides we show at town meeting or similar. I think, you know, like the Article 8 changes had a lot of red in it, and I missed some things because there was so much red.
yeah,
So I was just gonna set up a slide that has side by side of the existing and the new language for each section.
yeah.
And
But I
think
mean,
that'll work.
I'm wondering if we maybe need, if it would help to have a list sort of accompanying it. So we could say this particular section is essentially the same substance as.
Yeah, yeah,
current section, whatever, so that, you know, because people are looking at the two sets of writings, may not
all right,
be
well, for the,
easy for them.
yeah, and then you and I have exchanged email about the slideshow to roll out Article 8 next
Yeah.
week. And
Are you talking about for a forum or for town?
yeah,
meeting?
well, the forum, the slideshow I'm putting together for rolling these out in forums are also the
Okay.
test slides for town meeting. Because the format of explaining them would be the same, to have the language and stuff up on a screen where people can see it. But before,
Well,
we
I,
were gonna
just-
we were gonna discuss, before we get into the mechanics of the forums and town meeting, Article 2 was also on our agenda tonight. Are
A
we-
bunch of those got put into the two warrant articles that you looked at today. The Article 6, those will get the sign definitions. The Article 12 will get the other definitions that we looked at last time, the special permit granting authority and the site plan review and all that. And then we had a list of, let me see if I have it here.
Okay. But the number of
Yes.
definitions you had suggested before in another document for change in
That's,
Article.
yeah, so
2.
we addressed abandonment in Article 8.
Right,
You had agreed that we would take out the definition of board because we have zoning board of appeals and planning board defined separately. You had agreed to modify the premises definition, so that will go in a separate article with height. The signs are all gonna go in with the sign bylaw, once you review and approve those.
Yeah.
Site plan review, special permit granting authority, and variance are all being put into Article 12, and with the Article 12 revisions.
okay,
So it'll amend Article 2 to fix those, and you discussed and okayed those Article 2 definitions last time.
okay.
Now,
Yeah, so all the other ones, the only one on Article 2 we haven't resolved finally is height, if I'm not mistaken. All right,
Yeah.
let's talk about that for a minute. Clark isn't here. Be fair to Clark.
could I just clarify, I thought the annotation was a very good and helpful suggestion, and I think incorporating that will clarify things and make the rest of the meeting go a lot smoother.
All right, well, we'll
we can figure
I
out.
know
how-
we'll deal with it later, just before we
yeah,
forget.
let's just finish the agenda items and we'll talk about the presentation of all of this nonsense. All right, on height, again, the working group to today, we've had a working definition. Let me share my screen for a moment, if I may. Can everybody see this? This was Clark's edit of the minutes. But essentially, I asked him in response to one of these, about the height, if he wants to write something, and, this comment that would go in the minutes isn't resolving the damn definition. And I want it resolved, we got to get this done. This is one that's been discussed for 2 years. So one of his points was, our definition about the bottom, where we measure from the bottom, it says taking a bunch of points equidistant in the 360-degree radius. He's saying at 10-foot spacing. I'm okay with it. If it's 10-foot spacing, it's completely around the perimeter. I'm okay with it. So I can make that edit. And again, we'll finalize the language on the 1st. His other comment is about this 35, 40-foot thing. I don't know where he's coming from with this, but everybody knows our bylaws. We have a general 35-foot height. We allow for 5 feet for mechanicals. But in our sloped roof, we basically allow, since the measure is at the midpoint, another 5 feet to go up to the peak, which the definition is intending to eliminate that. And I
So you
think
just want to go to the highest point of the building at this point?
yeah, that's what the
It is.
intent is. I think as an architect, he's throwing in, well, give us the 5 foot of attic space and a peak roof. And that's a change I disagree with. I think it should be very simple. 35 feet is at the highest point, or whatever kind of roof it is, flat, mansard, gambrel, peaked. I don't know. I guess we'll hash this out again on, the deference to Clark being able to be heard on it more, since he can't be here at the moment. We'll defer that to the 1st as well. But we're all set on all other Article 2 changes that we're making now. And some of the definitions, as Judge Cutler mentioned, are being moved. And so we'll just, if everybody's okay with that, we'll just defer this height for another day. I'll make an edit with the spacing at the bottom, the points of measurement at the bottom. But I'm not super clear where he's coming from on the 35-40 thing, and I'm adamantly in favor of just making it the highest point, no matter what kind of roof it is. But
And
if
we
everybody's
want,
yeah,
and we
go
want
ahead.
the mean grade, right?
I'm sorry, say that again.
The mean grade of the various points.
I think well, no,
No.
this is what we're getting today, is we get 2 or 3 measurement points and they try to pick a median. That's why we said multiple points around the entire 360-degree.
At the base of the, at the base of the.
Base of the structure, and then I think our current bylaw, we kept it measured 10 feet away from the structure. So a 360-degree circle that's 10 feet away from the structure. And I just used equidistant points. Maybe it's less precise. If they're 10 feet apart, that's fine by me. But the point was to, we were finding cases where what the mean grade was being manipulated to allow for a higher roof. So we
Right.
wanted to have more measure. So anyway, we'll defer that to the next meeting. But so, and then, well, minutes we can do after the judge leaves. But you're looking in front of you, the 2 changes Clark wants to make to the minutes. Does anybody care?
No, I mean, he did bring up the discussion when we had it about all the
I
points
get it.
around.
And frankly, I think 0.8 is gratuitous, but that's between me and Clark to deal with. So,
No, I
If-
think he really just wanted to update the minutes, right? And then we could just further discuss.
Well, the relevant point is very simple. Is that what he actually said in the minutes? As
Mhm.
opposed to what he wanted to say later on, and he inserts it in the minutes. The minutes are not a fluid forum for him to move stuff around. So who does remember that he
I
said?
do. I do.
Okay.
I had those notes in my
Yeah,
Yes.
this goes to how the articles are going to be presented at town meeting. And I will tell you right now, he and I have a disagreement about this, and I've
But for
discussed
the-
it with
yeah.
Lauren as well, but I, you know, I don't care about the changes he made to article, to 0.7, 0.8, I wouldn't include, but if you want to include it, it's okay. I don't. No decisions,
I'm
no
not saying-
decision, no decisions were made. Well, all right, I may be reading too much in it. I know that's what he's going to say, that I'm reading too much into it, but you know what? It's maybe inside baseball stuff, but I don't,
Well, if he is saying,
nothing was resolved. So the bottom
Right.
line is nothing was resolved on how we're making presentations to
Right.
town meetings. So, all right.
No,
So
when he was mentioning it during the meeting, it was because Lauren was there at the time. It was more of like a quip during the meeting, more than,
he doesn't want Tom Callahan presenting these to town meetings. So that's how I am interpreting it. I'll say it to his face. Whatever. I don't want to get into it really in this meeting right now, but we'll discuss that in a moment. Because that's the next
don't
thing I want to
see-
discuss.
this is hypothetical, Tom, correct? All we're trying to do is represent what he said.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that
yes.
doesn't-
We didn't agree to,
Yeah, that doesn't
No,
mean we
didn't
agree with
to- We
it.
didn't agree to any of it. So yeah, I'll take a quick vote. Motion to approve the minutes of January 9th, 2023 as amended by Clark. Anybody want to second it?
I'll second it.
Thank you. All in favor? Alphabetical, I guess now I'm first. Tom Callahan, aye. Jack, you're next.
oh, Jack Creighton, aye.
David Frog, aye.
Cassie Malatesta, aye.
All right, now. That's our business on the agenda aside. We're sitting here, it's Monday, the 23rd. The plan was to do a forum next Monday, which I am going to be meeting with Cassandra and Lauren tomorrow morning to update our zoning bylaw page because it has a lot of material on it, which was like my original redrafts of the bylaw, which are now not in play. And we got to change that and put on this stuff that we're actually bringing forward. But one of the other things, we got to start publicizing this thing for next week. I have put together a slideshow that Judge Cutler and Lauren, mostly Judge Cutler today, was commenting on and finalizing to show the presentation of Article 8. And at the moment, because the red line was so difficult to read, for even me to read, knowing what it's supposed to say, the text of the new Article 8 and the old Article 8 will more be side by side. And we'll see how that works. And I think as we go forward to town meeting, a lot of times bylaw changes at town meeting are presented in a red line version. A lot of times they're not. It kind of is going to depend, I think, on the extent of the changes. We can't print in red, in colors. So we got to make it readable and we got to make it understandable. But I think for a large article like Article 12 as well, a side-by-side comparison may work, but we can also put in a note that says this is really not a substantial change, or maybe there'll be a way to do it. But we're also developing a slideshow for the late February forum, which will roll out all these other articles. And these two forums and the slideshows are the test case for town meeting, and we can tweak and make changes as we see the experience of these two forums and then go to town meeting.
I think, as I said earlier, an explanatory annotation is very, very helpful, especially as you mentioned, where we really want to say that this isn't a big change. I also think side by side is the only way to go. It's so confusing on the red line versions, especially if it can't be read. So I think we do side by side and then an annotation to explain what they're looking at. I mean, it's communications theory 101.
Yeah. And I just wanted to say, with respect to Clark's comments the last time about, in past town meetings, some simple changes are made short and sweet. I know how to make short and sweet presentations. I am constrained by my job often by members of the judiciary to be brief or
I was
be
going to
gone.
say it's only short because you're in front of a judge. That's the
Well, it's be brief or be gone. And over the
Yeah.
course of my life, I learned, when to be long and when to be short, depending on what it is I'm presenting and who I'm
Yeah.
presenting it to. I will tell you this.
I think we owe a big gratitude to the judges of this world, Judge Cutler. I am talking about you.
Yes, agreed.
I'll tell you a little story of when I was town planner in Concord. We had an elderly statesman type moderator who was a lawyer at Goodwin Proctor. And he had been, a town official for years and years and years. And he was our town council at one point. And when he was town council, he would sit there, he would have this enormous book that clearly had all his notes and all the bylaws and everything else in it. And he never stood in front of the audience. He sat in the back of the room. And if somebody asked a question directed to town council, he would get up, he'd carry his book all the way to the podium at the front. And then he would open it very slowly, kind of peruse it, and then either say yes or no, close the book and walk back to his seat. And he told me once that the reason he did that was the longer he stayed at the podium, the more questions people were going to ask. It's just, and people accepted it for whatever reason. He had that kind of gravitas, I guess.
Yeah, and our town moderator now keeps us on a fairly short leash, although I will want to speak to him about this one, because the other thing I was going to say is that the forums may be different than how I present these at town meeting, or how we present these at town meeting, however we do them. But the experience from the working group of going to the fall 21 town meeting, this is major rules and laws for the town. I do not intend to do a short and sweet and pull the wool over their eye explanation to people, such that when you have an ignorant town meeting, ignorant in the sense of not knowing what it really is being put in front of them, other people at town meeting who do can manipulate that town meeting to their own agenda, which is exactly what happened in the fall of 21. That is not going to happen again. I am not going to let that happen. And that means, if it's a 5-minute presentation and risk that, or a 10-minute presentation, so we have an informed town meeting, that's the latter will be the choice I take. And the idea of these forums was to prevent, shame on the working group. We didn't do a great job of preparing for fall town meeting. We didn't think we had to based on normal town meeting experience. These forums and rolling all of this stuff out ahead of time is to try as much as possible to inform the electorate who's going to show up at town meeting. We're not going to get to everybody, and there's going to be people who stuff the room for their particular issue and then aren't really going to care about zoning, and yet they're going to vote anyway. But I'm going to err on the side of caution of explaining these things to people. But the ones that we are bringing forward are, for the most part, simple, routine housekeeping and aren't controversial and will be presented as such. But if there's questions, we're going to answer the questions. If there's people who are manipulating it and misrepresenting it for whatever reason, unlike what happened last time, they're going to get called out on it. I will have to speak to the moderator about that because he doesn't like conflict, but we can't have misrepresentations go on like happened at that town meeting. That was, for those of you who weren't on the working group, that was a rather traumatic event for us. And part of the thing that I think led to some resignations from the working group, unfortunately, but I don't want to see that repeated. So, the forum will be a test case, but it is the kind of thing where, yes, slideshow presentation, here's what we want to do because it's almost town meeting like. It's just that we're not asking for a vote, and we're asking for feedback. Now, Lauren had mentioned a couple of meetings ago about future forums we do on particular topics, maybe changing it as a roundtable and changing the format from like a lecturing forum type thing. I agree with her, and I've asked her to start thinking about that. I think when we start to have a public forum on the area regs and then the dimensional regs, a different kind of format than just lecture presentation, look for feedback kind of thing. I think we should have more breakout groups for roundtable, not say anything and say, okay, what's your concern about this? We'll have to direct a topic, like we'll say house size, frontage, but we're now for next week and for late February, and then what we have to do with the planning board and with the other boards, it's a presentation type format. We'll test this out. There are, at the moment, to do this Article 8, there's 13 PowerPoint slides, but the side-by-sides works out to about 3 or 4 pages of Word slides. Judge, those are in a separate email to take a look at. And then started to work on the one for the others, and the other articles too can be dealt with fairly shortly and quickly. And that's how I want to do it, but not to the point of making it so short that town meeting doesn't really know what it's voting on. I don't want that to happen. I'd rather lose than not have them.
No, I think there's two separate things. When you're talking about the forum and you're going to get into the different slides, I think you should, try it out and see how it goes. Because when you get to town meeting, depending upon the articles of which ones we're dealing with as we're doing it, you want a general overview with maybe the top 3 things that you're changing or whatever they are, the top 3, top 4, top 5, whatever they end up being, of what the changes are, and just get that overview out there. And then, maybe you might do the side by side with a noted, and then take the questions as they come. But if it devolves into, people saying, well, on, page 8, section 2, subsection 3, blah, 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 if you get into that deep dive, you've got to extract it back out of there, because when you get into that, that's where it gets confusing for people. People are all ruffling through their paperwork, trying to figure out what it is. And that's just, you want to stick to the general overview of what it's going to do. And but
Of
I
course,
mean,
but
if it
people who are
devolves,
going to ask us. There's
no,
people who
that's
are gonna
fine.
ask those
That's
questions.
that's absolutely fine. But I mean, you have to bring it back to the general points of it as well all the time, because when it devolves into burying yourself in there somewhere, that's not a place we want to be in order to get it passed.
No.
And there could be, and a lot of the questions that there could be, frankly, we don't know, because it depends on their property. So, with most of the questions that you get, it's very dependent on their property and the way
Yeah.
it's laid out and the size of it and stuff. And so they're gonna have to
Well,
get an
we're gonna
engineer.
we'll
an
get
attorney.
those we'll get those with the single lot exemption, because we did when we rolled it out the first time.
You shouldn't have a lot of individualized questions with most of these articles. They are general, and they're
Mhm.
not.
Yeah,
not gonna
and
affect people's,
and-
personal property.
One of the bullet points about the single lot exemption is that there's no way we can make a determination of how many people are actually affected by it. I'm going to concede that point, and it's individual, property specific, case by case analysis that has to be made. The emphasis on the single lot exemption changes we're proposing is that we're not affecting anybody's rights who has rights today.
That's the big one.
Hammer that point home a zillion times.
Yeah.
and-
That's the big one that needs to be announced to the hills, because it's only going to be to keep from getting new ones. So I think there should be a general agreement on that, I would hope.
And if
The
they,
the question we have to, excuse me a minute, Judge, the question we ought to have, if somebody then goes and says, and this will come up with house size and this will come up with frontage, is what's wrong with that? Somebody's going to say, what's wrong with allowing these lots to be developed? What's wrong with houses that are 10,000 square feet? What's wrong with frontage that's only 50 feet? That's the key question we all have to be prepared to answer. That's going to come up
yeah,
repeatedly.
we are, and part of the answer is very simple. the community has certain standards in to guide how they wish the town to look at. And these are the standards. That's why we're here before town meeting. You can vote on it. But are we going to get into the weeds on your property? For information that we can't verify when we've had these out long, we've had these out for you to look at earlier. Sorry, they're out there. And if you choose that you don't like it, that's fine too, but we're not going to be your lawyer, developer, and architect at the floor of town meeting.
Well, I try not to be too snarky in my old age, and Danny, the town moderator, won't let me be snarky, but, sometimes I think at town meeting, and especially at the fall of 21, is that we didn't get snarky because we had gross misrepresentations of what was being presented that ended up carrying the day, almost defeating the article. Thank God it got withdrawn.
Well, because we figured out, I figured out, because, when you're up the front, you can read. And I read,
Yeah,
it.
they'd
sown enough confusion that it wasn't going to pass. And that's one of the tactics. You sow confusion and uncertainty. We know that do that.
I know I don't want to go through all of what happened at that town meeting, but I'll just say that it is not just this committee that's going forward presenting these changes, and the other committees in town who are going to see this. My committee, zoning board, and the select board had better be prepared to get up and speak in support of this stuff.
Well,
Because if it's just looked at the five of us again, it's going to be a repeat of fall of 21. I'm not going through that again.
we know that, but can we move on to the gist of what we're here?
No, that's it. No, I guess what I will do is, I just wanted Judge Cutler to look at the side-by-side comparison to Mark's slides, and I'll circulate the slides to everybody. And if anybody has a thing, I can certainly make a change. I just got to get it publicized, which I'll talk to Cassandra and Lauren about. I'm going to put something out on Cohasset 143 to start the publicity about it. As far as the select board tomorrow night, it's by Zoom, correct? I think it, please.
I'll have to double check.
All right, well, I prefer it, but if I have to be there live, I'll be there live. I have prepared a one-page summary. Some of what we've discussed tonight has changed that because of what we're going to do with wind and solar, but it's a one-page laying out where we are for this town meeting, what we're looking at for the next town meeting, and what we're doing, our presentation schedule and approval schedule for this town meeting.
That's what's on the agenda. And that's what we want to see on the agenda. We don't want to get into discussion about the various.
Keep your board from asking me questions then. I'll just present that here's where we are.
Just telling you, Tom.
I know.
Put it on the agenda for a brief update.
All right.
We're not going to get into the weeds. That's not the purpose of this. This is not the purpose to have a forum to educate people. It's because the select board wants to know what we're doing.
Okay. Understood. That's what we're doing.
I think the thing
As
is, remember,
far as-
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, one more thing, just about the
go ahead.
scheduling. So I assume for when we have to actually submit these articles for the warrant, and it looks like there's about 9-10 articles. These need to be ready by the end of February. Correct? So if we're shooting for,
We're in good shape except for signs. That has to be kind of tinkered with a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And the Article 3 with the mapping, hopefully we get resolved in the next week or so. And once that's done, you've got all the articles essentially. We'll do up the last height stuff. I'll get to you next week or the week after, so you'll have it for you that next meeting. And if we can decide that, if hopefully Tanya's committee can send me sooner rather than later some responses to the diagnostic questions, I can start putting together a draft of that.
All right, I mean, for the rollout of all the non-Article 8 articles in the February 29th forum, that is, we don't have to necessarily have the final text for that forum, but
We will.
whatever it is that the deadline is with submitting them to the town clerk, that's what we have to hit.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
okay.
just so for Cassandra, as I'm saying to you, we do want this prepared as quickly as possible to get out to the town. So whatever resources that you need, and you feel free to give me a call, by the way.
Yeah, and by the way, in addition to the forum, I want to explore with Cassandra and Lauren tomorrow and with Justin, other ways of getting the text out. And again, that part of it is on our zoning bylaw committee page, which has old stuff on it, needs to come off, and this stuff that we're actually doing needs to go on. But even other ways, maybe through 143 or some other, getting it out there.
How do
Because
you publish your notice for the planning board public hearing? Do you reprint the warrant articles that the planning board is going to be considering, or do you refer to the articles printed in the warrant?
Good question. Well, you know what? That's for Carol. Carolyn's doing a seminar for the planning board in February on how to conduct these Section 5 hearings, since we have so many new members. But
Okay.
my guess is we probably won't, in the public notice itself, publish the full text, but we'll
But you'll refer to it online or
refer to it at
Well-
copies in the planning board office or something.
Tom, one of the things to remember is all the forums are that were taped. They're on YouTube, and those can be shared vis-a-vis email or whatever. And that would be something to look with maybe the TV channel 143 to see maybe if they could be replayed as well.
Okay.
That might be another just potential avenue to
Yeah,
get some of it out.
I think the 3 that we did were replayed a couple of times. I never saw them, but
Well, we have a communications officer in Justin. And it's his responsibility to take this information and disseminate it. So what we want to ask him, and you can have him refer to me, but my feeling is that he needs to organize, sketch out, and plan a public relations campaign, and it's his job to implement it.
Yep.
So we tell him what we want, and that's what his job, and he's done a very good job so far.
oh, he has. It's just,
Okay.
I'm right, sitting here tonight, I'm just concerned it's the 23rd and we're doing a forum
I
next
know,
Monday. There's
and
been
you
no
should.
publicity.
Should, but you
But
can
anyway,
tell him
we'll get
tomorrow,
it.
he has his marching orders.
Yeah, and there's nothing that says that after the planning board hearings that hopefully the public will attend. We can do another public forum if we can squeeze it in, but the schedule right now is planning board might take 2 March meetings to do our Section 5 hearings. And then hopefully 1, but maybe 2. And then we're gonna, the only committees I'm really concerned about getting formal endorsements from is Select Board, Advisory, and Zoning. We're gonna do all those in April. And then May 1st is the big day. And Judge Cutler, I'd appreciate it if you'd clear your calendar because
I think you'll have Carolyn for your town meeting.
yeah, I just, in the presentation at town meeting, we'll certainly want to get the help
I can
of
certainly
expert
help.
legal opinion. I don't want to give my legal opinion on all this nonsense, but. All right, David, was there something else? I apologize that I interrupted you earlier.
No, that was it. That was it. Just about, we'll get in touch with Justin regarding it, because all that, like I said, everything has been taped. It's, the previous ones are
Right.
of the forum are on YouTube. So we just need to connect with him and see what's going to make sense.
And again, the reason the select board, reason we have a communications guy, the reason we have Justin is to take care of this.
Yeah, well, he's been great. I just haven't talked to him in 2 or 3
Okay.
weeks. but-
Right, well, that's fine. If you have any issues, I'll be glad to talk to him. But, this whole process is, after all, an initiative of the select board, which specifically set up this committee and pulled it away from all the other things so the job could be done. And I think a good job is being done. So now it is the responsibility of the town to do the publicity, and that's Justin's job. And so let's just understand the process and make sure it works effectively, because there's a lot of work, as everybody's pointed out, that needs to be done. So, and you have the full support of the select board, which is why we're having you to give an update tomorrow.
I'll find that out tomorrow night, won't I?
Well,
The other thing, David, you had mentioned about the background. of
okay,
all of
well,
this.
anything else, Tom?
No, you can dive if you want.
Yeah,
Are you okay with me now? Or,
Yeah,
mean?
well, there was a little feedback from the committee about presentation as well. Just a quick thing. The other thing was the background stuff. And in the slideshow for Monday, Judge Cutler's seen this, like the first 5 slides background. I am going to introduce everybody this time. I was remiss in our past forums. But a long time ago, when I first envisioning town meeting, I had even a longer historical background about zoning in Massachusetts, zoning in Cohasset. I do think at town meeting, it would help if people understood that and had that background. We can talk about in the future and you can see what the slides would look like. But again, we're talking to mostly a populace that knows nothing about this, nothing of the history, particularly so many new people. Danny's got to give us the time to do it because it's not a 5-minute presentation, but I also think that should be or an orientation background to this
Okay.
whole thing needs to be delivered to people, but I'll just leave it at that for now. So,
okay, and one of the things is that for the forum, the members of the committee were appointed to do that, and I think we would feel it's very important that all committee members, if possible, attend the forums. It looks really good, and it goes a long way towards getting this thing passed. When people see in person all the committee members sitting up there, it's hard to turn them down. So in any event,
all right.
are
I
we
think
all set, Tom?
yeah, we're all set unless
Okay.
anybody has something. So,
Motion to adjourn?
Thank you,
motion
guys.
to adjourn. It's 8:48. All in favor? Tom Callahan, aye.
Jack Creighton, aye.
David Frog, aye.
Cassie Malatesta, aye.
All right, Cassandra, Judge Cutler, thank you very much.
thank you.
You're
Jack,
welcome.
I'll see you
Thank
tomorrow
you,
night,
Judge
Jack.
Cutler. Always a pleasure to see you.
All right, bye.
Good night, all.
All right.